Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to our Ghouls panel discussion today. I am going to be your host for the day. You probably know me, Zoe, Editor-in-Chief of Ghouls Magazine, and today we are going to be discussing Andrzej Zulawski's Possession, because it is 40 years old this month actually, which is amazing. I have 4 incredible guests joining me today. We've got a bit of a different way of doing it. So rather than a panel, we're going to be getting each guest on separately to discuss different elements of the film. And our first guest is going to be Alison Taylor, and we're going to be discussing Possession in general, and also a little bit about an upcoming book that I have heard of. Then at about 9:30 BST, we've got Lauren Hart coming on to discuss women expressing trauma somatically. Then at 9:45, we're going to be joined by Sloane Kay, who's going to be talking about the representation of doppelgangers. Oh, I can't talk today. And then at about 10 p.m. BST, I will be joined by Wren Crain, who we are going to be discussing bipolar disorder on screen. So before I keep on messing up all the words and without taking up too much of your time, I am going to get Ali into our discussion. So I'm going to add Ali and hopefully it works. I'm going to ask Ali to come off mute. Hi, Ali.
Morning. Good morning, good evening.
I am so sorry because it's like, what, 6 a.m. where you are?
6 a.m. Yeah, it's all good. It's all right. I've got my coffee.
I'm in your Possession mug as well. Right. Oh my God, that's amazing. So I have to get you on because I don't know anyone that loves Possession more than you, basically. So it was like I had to speak to you. And of course, I'm not sure if you've broadcasted it too much yet, but here it is now out in the world. You have an upcoming book on Possession. So it seemed a little bit relevant. My kind of first question to you is, what was your first experience with Possession?
I first saw it in early 2000s, this wacky film. I was working in a video store and the front cover, browse the front covers when you're on work and then see what you'll get out later. And I saw this. I actually found my copy of it. This is the cover I saw. And I'm like, hold on. Sam Neill, the Jurassic Park guy, my brilliant career guy. What is happening here? I have to see this. And I took it home and just was absolutely blown away. I've never seen anything like it. I've been obsessed with it ever since, to the point where I decided to dedicate quite a bit of time writing a book about it. But yeah, I've just never seen performances like it. The dialogue is bonkers. It's such a strange, beautiful, affecting film.
Yeah, it's I've never seen anything like it, and I think I kept hearing people talking about it, being like, I think this is going to be your kind of film, and I watched it. And I don't know what that says about me.
What do they think of you?
It's quite jarring as a film, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how do you think it kind of, because a lot of people recommended it to me in the fact that it's like really disturbing, which I think it definitely is. How do you think, because you're obviously, for anyone watching that doesn't know, you're obviously a big fan of disturbing films, hence why we connected.
Yes.
How do you think that it kind of compares to other disturbing films?
Well, on the contrary, I think the Gwyneth Paltrow Possession is probably far more disturbing than Zulawski's film. No, it's. I think when we think of disturbing films, we tend to think about violence and gore and stuff. And to me, what I find so interesting about Possession is, yes, it has violence and yes, it has gore and it's got a tentacle monster, but that's not what's disturbing to me. To me, it's the marriage itself and the way that the kind of divorce is so ugly and raw. And there's two people that love each other very much, but are pretty much just hell-bent on tearing each other to pieces. That's what gets under my skin. So I think it's significant for that compared to other disturbing movies that I've seen. And I know we've talked about the new French Extremity and all the, bloodletting that happens in those. It's a totally different thing. It's, I think it's the ordinariness of some of it that I find really gritty.
Yeah, and I think it's way more psychological. And one of the things that really kind of stood out to me was the way that they're so brutally honest each other. I think quite at the beginning of the film, they're kind of just like, yeah, not really interested. And everyone's like, me too. I was like, fucking hell. I was like,
yeah, this marriage. Zulawski's talked about it as kind of, and I think you get this from the film, just how claustrophobic it feels. Like sort of the way that they're trapped in this apartment together and are just right in each other's faces. And then he does stuff with the camera and stuff as well to kind of make you feel that. But you're really just trapped in this toxic relationship, which, now that I think about it, all the people such as yourself who've been stuck in lockdown, it might be even more confronting than when I first saw it. But yeah, it's this feeling of being trapped in this really horrific relationship as well is really unsettling.
Yeah, it's so unsettling. And I mean, I think that there are so many different topics explored in this film. Like, it can be read in a ridiculous amount of ways. And obviously, later on, I'm going to be joined by, a couple of other people, and everyone seems to have like their own take on what this film is about. So I want to ask you kind of, what do you think is the main theme or topic that Zulawski was trying to explore with this, other than the fact that he thought his ex-wife was maybe a bit of a bitch?
So much. It was one of the hardest films I found to write the synopsis of, even because there's just so much going on. Usually when you start a piece of writing, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like, okay, I've got to get some words on the page. I'll just talk about what happens because that'll be the easy bit, right? And then in this film, I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? Just trying to get the basic plot out. There's so much going on. I think it's possession. It's called Possession. And I think a lot of people probably, maybe, especially if you saw the cover that I just showed you, would think, oh, it's demonic possession and it's this horror film. But it's so much more than that. It's I think it's about possession of a couple, like the couple trying to possess each other. These two people who are in this toxic relationship, as I said, and Mark is trying to possess Anna and isn't understanding why she's behaving the way that she is. You've got Heinrich later on who's trying to possess her as well. They're all trying to insert their own kind of control on her. So it's about that kind of possession, but it's also, it's set in the height of the Cold War in Berlin, with the Berlin Wall being this very divisive structure that you see right in the opening shot. So it's about, the state trying to possess its citizens, and kind of, again, that's adding to this claustrophobic kind of sense of it, where people are, literally watching the film crew all the time. They're always under surveillance when you've got very real guards peering up at them with binoculars. Breakup of relationships. It's about politics and ideologies. There is a religious aspect to it as well, I suppose. But it's not the kind of religious possession that we think of in terms of demons and stuff, which I'm sure there's, you would have seen hundreds of those films. The one that comes to mind is The Exorcist. Don't play with a Ouija board. You'll probably be okay. Whereas this is like, why is she behaving like this? I don't understand, but I just can't look away, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, like, for me, that was kind of the thing, like, and I think the first time I watched it, there were so many elements of it that I missed. Like, I completely kind of overlooked that because I was so enamored with her, and how kind of, I guess I was like, why is she mental? Like, what's wrong with her? But in the same way, you're kind of going, like you just said, why is she acting like that? But I think it's really easy at the same time to identify with her.
Oh, 100%.
Which is just screaming. I was like, Yeah, I can feel that.
That's why your mates recommended it to you, Zoe. They thought, I know this girl.
I don't dare show it to my boyfriend because he'll be like, I'm sensing some
yeah. Are you trying to tell me something? It's a red flag.
What do you think of so one of the questions I had was I seem to still struggle with maybe what is the monster? What does the monster what does it mean to you?
Oh God. It's funny, and I write about this in the book, is that even Zulawski is kind of like, I dare you to give a coherent reading of what the monster means. Like, he didn't know 100% either. It's my takeaway, unless he was faking. But I think at once, I mean, she kind of births it, or it comes out of her kind of just in this subway tunnel. And I know you definitely we can't talk about possession without talking about that scene. But in one sense, it's kind of evacuated from her, like she's giving birth to this. So is it, maybe it's some sort of psychic trauma and the detritus of this damaged relationship coming out of her. Other people have been, again, I'll talk about this in the book, but the original screenplay, or the way that Zulawski imagined seeing the monster's creation, happened several times in the film originally, and then he's just cut it back and gone, no, this is the moment. But there was one bit where she's actually creating the monster and like forming it like a golem kind of creature out of clay and stuff. Like, not out of clay, sorry, out of all the goo in the subway and sand and stuff, she sort of molds it. So in that sense, and I think that still comes through a little bit in terms of maybe she's created it as well. It's not just this involuntary thing she's evacuated. There's this sense that she has some control over it. And I think for me, the bit that still remains with that reading is the fact that, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, the monster that she creates, it grows to become her husband. So even though they've spent the entire film kind of at each other's throats, there's still this sense of like, well, this is the perfect other that she's imagined that she wants. And then you've got the doppelganger, which I'm sure you'll get into with your other guest, but of Anna through Helen. But what is it? Other people have said, is this the evil of the, political ideology that Zulawski's critiquing that's kind of crept up into their world? I think, I've been very careful, I think, when I was writing about it, to say, look, I don't have the definitive word on this. And I think it's deliberately ambiguous, and you get a lot more from it. Everyone you talk to kind of has a different interpretation. And I think there's many that are valid at the same time.
And I think that's kind of like the entirety of the film is almost, you can kind of like project whatever you want to project into the characters, into the doppelgangers, even the monsters. Like, oh, maybe it's like, manifestation of jealousy is, you often say like green-eyed monster. I mean, I'm not sure if it has eyes or quite what it's got, but it's so fantastic in the way that it kind of brings all those elements together. You start talking a bit there about the subway scene, which is obviously like, one of the standout scenes.
Yes.
I was like, you know what? Yeah, I just want to start walking home and like start flinging my shopping bags around and like screaming. And I'm pretty sure I have done that on a night out.
I mean, who hasn't dreamt of doing that? You just get that one extra person in your job that just pushes you over the edge. And it's so tempting.
Done that today, let's be honest.
yeah well, my day's just starting, so no one's annoyed me yet. give me till your time, 9 p.m.
With that subway scene, is it, like, obviously we just spoke about then about being like the birth of the monster. Some people likened it to perhaps a potential miscarriage between a couple. For me, it's almost kind of a personification of her internalized, that rage and that frustration. The ooze could even be coming out. I don't know what you how you interpret that scene, and if you think
the ooze,
the scene, whatever it is you want to interpret. The milk, is it milk?
Oh, look, I think it's milk, but it could be anything. Well, she smashes her groceries up against the wall at one point, but it's funny you say, you know, what is it? Because I was reading through the archives of the British Classification Board, and they're trying to make sense of this movie. And you really get a sense of the movies that they normally watch. And then they're like trying to take this film and kind of make sense of it. You know, they're looking at it like, well, do we need to cut this? But they're kind of, you know, in order to describe what they think might need to be cut or what's okay, they're trying to make sense of it. And someone described it as like when the porridge oats come out of her. Like they've just seen their morning porridge. And I was like, oh. So it could be anything. It could be anything. Open to interpretation. But subway scene, absolutely astonishing. I think that was the first time I'd been terrified by a performance. Just in the sense that, you know, I know it's an actor and I've seen her in other things, and I know that this is a role that she's performing, and I've seen other people perform crazy, but it feels so unhinged and out of control that I'm just like, oh, anything could happen. This is bonkers. She's, you know, at what point is that not performance anymore? When, you know, I think there's a moment when she actually hits her head up against the wall of the subway, and just keeps going. And it's just like, oh God, like, who is this? Is this Ajani? Is this just pure emotion? I mean, she won awards for it, and rightly so. It's terrifying. And she was traumatized by the whole experience, which probably
was she?
But it's such a powerful performance. Yeah. Good luck getting her to talk about it.
Wow.
Well, read the book. She had a really rough time on this film. The way she's described it, she felt very manipulated by Zulawski, and there's interesting stuff there on how he got these performances, because it's not just her, right? She's incredible, but Sam Neill is unhinged. Everyone in this film is just so at another level. It's like this alien kind of world where you're looking at these people just, yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it makes it, you know, obviously awful that she felt like that during the filming, because, you know, I think there's been far too many cases where, you know, actresses or actors have been kind of pushed beyond their limits to get a raw and authentic portrayal. But you know, everyone in this film, you feel the emotion, you know, even like you said, it feels like the whole way through he is in pain. Like, it's in his eyes as you watch this movie.
I mean, how could you not go through whatever it takes to get to that place and not be affected by it? Like, it could make sense. But yeah, I don't know. According to Zulawski, she kind of responded after the film, and it was sort of, I think she went to some really dark psychological places to kind of get those emotions, and you see it, and that's why it's so horrific and scary and real. But yeah, maybe seeing herself in that way and realizing what had happened and where she'd gone, kind of, I mean, essentially the way she discusses it in the rare occasions where she's talked about it is like having PTSD, essentially.
Wow.
From this film.
Wow.
But, I don't know. And then, but she was down to do another film with him later on. It didn't actually happen that way, but I was like, okay, I'm confused now. You don't trust him as a director, but you've signed on to these other movies. So I don't know the full story, what happened there, and there's conflicting accounts of kind of what happened and how consensual that performance was. Whether Zulawski has studied voodoo and getting performances. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, but it's
wow.
Yeah.
maybe the tentacle thing was real. And
maybe the tentacles are real. Yeah.
Amazing effects this one has. And he's like, oh, do my voodoo.
I found it in Tahiti.
So one of the other things for me about this film is like, when people were telling me about it, like the only thing they mentioned was that tentacle creature.
Yeah, it stands out.
It does quite stand out, and it is almost quite, I don't know, it comes into the film and you're going, oh right, I wasn't really expecting that. But do you think this is, and I know you love this film, so I can kind of guess.
Oh, very much.
But do you think this is a film that maybe doesn't get enough credit for what it actually is?
I think it's getting a lot more credit now than when it came out. Like when it came out, people were just like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is it? It's insane. People are yelling all the time. But I mean, it's one of those films that maybe came out before people were kind of ready, and it's kind of over the last 4 decades, it's really grown, and now it's considered this masterpiece of auteur cinema. So I think it's one of those films that's kind of grown into itself. And if you look at the way, I guess critics have kind of dealt with it, and it's really resonated, especially with feminist audiences and stuff. Like a lot of women really love this film, which is, I think, testament to just how complex it is. Because, you know, at the same time, you go, people writing it off as, oh, Zulawski's always shooting these misogynist women, and he's misogynist, hysterical women, and he must be a misogynist to want to see Ajani kind of on her knees in the subway in the muck. When really, and I've got to say, if you haven't read House of Psychotic Women by Kayla Janice, you need to get yourself a copy today. It's incredible. But yeah, there's so much more going on with this film than I think. When you go, oh, it's a creature feature, it's this octopus thing. Whereas again, you got audiences at the time going into it thinking it's a creature feature and being like, where the fuck's the monster? I'm halfway through and it's not here. Like the monster's like very small in it. It's not what is terrifying about this movie. It's not the threat in it. It's not chasing people down like we're used to in monster movies. It's kind of just there. It's this manifestation of whatever it is, their relationship, of her desires, there's so much more going on. And like I said, I've seen it lots of times now, especially having to write about it, but I get more out of it every time I see it. I still couldn't tell you back to back exactly. Like, I'm sure I'll discover more later on and be like, shit, that should have gone in the book. How did I miss that? But like, yeah, it's anyway. What are your thoughts, Zoe?
Yeah, exactly the same as yours. And you know, I think actually, I mean, I would have loved to see the people that went into that film being like, oh, there's going to be a fun creature feature, and coming out and being like, what just happened to me? But you're absolutely right about, like, you know, kind of a lot of women taking this and seeing it as like a really feminist kind of piece, because that's how I felt. I was like, yes, okay, in a way she's, you know, you could call her psychotic, but like you said, in the book House of Psychotic Women, which I recently read, you know, kind of like, actually it's that those emotions that are sometimes so difficult to communicate and get across, and do end up coming out as, you know, frustration and violence. And I think what I really like in Possession is that she can never fully communicate to you know, Sam Neill's character. She's always kind of like so pent up, you know, even to the point where the meat carver, and you know, she is struggling so much to get her words out, she kind of just cuts her own throat, because it's almost like, what's easier than getting the words out and communicating for her is just to go, I'll just cut my throat open, which is, you know, and I think,
release. It's something. It's right. That's how much pain these people are in, and that those kitchen sequences are horrific. But She's struggling to speak. Oh, poor Bob. Bob's just left. Bob's abandoned. He's covered in jam. He doesn't know what's going on. We need the follow up really, where Bob's grown up, and it's just actually I don't think anyone needs to see this.
No, it is. I think it is definitely kind of like a feminist film now. Like everyone. When I was kind of saying like, who wants to talk about possession? It was just, a lot of women were like, I have so many thoughts. This is what I wanted. This is the response I wanted. Like, very about that.
If you think about the way that women are kind of told about, you're hysterical, or you're too emotional, or you need to just calm down and be rational, etc., etc. It's kind of like you're enculturated to feel shame about your emotions in a way that I guess men are in a different way, and it's, the whole boys don't cry thing, but it's, you're constantly told by culture to sort of like keep it inside and, to calm down and stop being irrational. And then it's like, in this film, we just see Ajani, who we're used to seeing. If you've watched her other films, I mean, she does go crazy, but, at the same year this was released, the other film she won the award for was Quartet, which is this, very quaint chamber piece, Ivan Mertry. God, it's so early, I'm sorry. And then there's Possession, and it's like, oh, what the hell? And so Ajani is just like leaned in to the unhingedness. And it's just, it feels like a catharsis. And I think that's kind of the way, I don't want to speak for her, but the way that Kayla Janice kind of describes her experience watching it, and kind of being told growing up in her house that her voice was the problem, and stop with the emotions and the madness and sort of stuff. And it's just like, oh, I'm seeing someone on screen that is, articulating the way that I've felt, and I think the way that a lot of women have felt. And even if as bonkers as the film is, it's, even if you haven't felt that kind of hysterical urge, everyone's had a bad breakup, and I think it just really taps into what those emotions feel like on screen in a way that I've never seen anywhere else. Yeah.
And I think that's
stalling answer.
Well, and that's absolutely part of the power of the film is kind of that connection, and that central performance. And I'm going to let you head off in a minute and get some more coffee, because I
need it. Can you tell?
Get up at like 6 a.m. But before you go, can you give us a little bit of more of a synopsis about your book? Anything, when it might come out? What should we and also where we can find you and follow along to make sure that everyone can buy a copy, because I will personally make sure they do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you like this film, I think you'll get a lot out of it. It's due out later this year. That's as much information as I have at this stage. But it'll be through Devil's Advocates, which is a great horror monograph series. If you love horror films, you've probably already found it. But yeah, Devil's Advocates coming out later this year. The book looks at the film, I guess, as an artifact of the whole thing. So it's kind of like, how did this film get made? What does it maybe mean? And again, I really resist giving that definitive kind of answer, because I don't know. But I kind of look at sort of the major themes in it, and try and make some head or tail sense of it, so you can appreciate it more, rather than here is what it means, which I think would be an unfair thing to do, and a futile kind of hubristic thing to do. I look at the reception of it. Like I said, I went and looked at the British Board of Classification, because obviously if you know about the video nasties, you'd know that this film ran into a lot of trouble in Britain. So I sort of went through that, and then I kind of look at what maybe it means today as well. So looking into those sort of like the adoption of it by feminist critics, the way that it's kind of resonated 40 years later. So that's what it is. You can find me on Twitter is probably the best way. And I know, thankfully, Zoe keeps putting my little handle up there because it's a pain in the ass to spell, but it's at Préféré ne pas. But yeah, follow me. If you just click on the links to this stream, you'll find me, and I'll be putting any updates about the book there when I have them.
Exciting stuff. Wow. I'll make sure that everyone can find you. Thank you for getting up.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. Thanks for putting up with my whatever mess that was that I might watch back later and be horrified by. I hope it made some sense. Yeah.
Right, speak to you soon, Ali. Bye.
Thank you. See you, Zoe.
Okay, now I'm going to get our next guest on. I'm going to invite Lauren to join us. And Lauren, there you are. Hello. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. A little bit nervous. My first time doing this kind of thing, but yeah, feeling good.
It's fine. I usually just drink like 5 gins, and get into the slump a bit. Before we get into what we are going to discuss about possession, do you just want to give a little bit of an intro about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Lauren Hart. I have a horror film blog called Let's Scare Lauren to Death. And basically I write reviews of horror movies, write some analysis pieces, but coming from more of a feminist, sometimes psychoanalytical perspective. So obviously very happy to discuss a film like Possession for that reason.
And yes, thank you so much for coming and joining me. And of course, as well, you are one of our wonderful Ghouls Magazine contributors, which of course is, why you're even more than welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to discuss possession, kind of talking about something that you picked up on, which I think is really, really interesting. So you were talking about how Anna and the film in general kind of presents her trauma somatically. What I wanted to ask you was, why do you think Zulawski decided to kind of present trauma in this way?
Yeah, I think when I was doing a bit of research about the film, I noticed that Zulawski had said that a woman here serves as a medium. And I thought that was a really interesting quote. And I think that I'm not sure if Zulawski was particularly interested in psychoanalytical theory or anything like that. But obviously, that whole idea of a woman's body being used to express something, really reminded me of that idea of the hysterical body. And I think basically what that means is that if you cannot express your desires and your feelings and your thoughts through words, then the body becomes basically like a communication device. So if I can't speak, then I will articulate how I feel through my body. I think that I think the psychoanalytical theorist Mary Wilde, I think, just to give her credit, she had a really good quote about how in this film, the body, the hysteric, functions as a theatre for unspeakable repressed desire. And I think that's absolutely, I just absolutely agree with that concept and the idea of what's going on. And I think if you sort of, for example, think about the tunnel scene, obviously very infamous scene. It has this raw, visceral power, and it's she's using her physicality to explain something painful, some kind of emotional trauma. And I think, whether it be the physical trauma of going through a miscarriage, or even just to explain, try to physicalize her dissatisfaction with her marriage, or maybe she's being sort of sexually unfulfilled as well, potentially. I think Zulawski was really using sort of expressing trauma in this particular way through the body in that scene. And I think, and also just to take it even a step further, I guess what I call the slimy goo monster that sort of appears in the movie. Well, I think I've heard it described as a Lovecraftian fuck monster as well, but I think I'm sticking with the slimy goo monster for now. That, is basically sort of, it begins to be a manifestation of her anger and her unhappiness of her marriage, and again, maybe potentially her lack of sexual fulfillment. And And in that sense, it kind of reminds me of Paul Nola in David Cronenberg's The Brood. Like, you know, again, like a character that's like literally bringing some physical entity to life that's sort of represented through their trauma. And I guess maybe the question is like, why is Zulawski doing that? And I kind of feel like it's almost like by making your emotional trauma into a physical entity, it sort of like brings it out into the open, so we can actually confront it and we can discuss it and we can actually have a conversation about it, and then hopefully then as a way of actually sort of processing it really and trying to come to terms with it, trying to deal with it. And in my personal opinion, like I feel that's what he's doing with that particular device. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you know, that for me was one of the aspects of possession that I love so much was, you know, I mean, personally, I am not a talker. I will do everything to avoid confronting, you know, emotions. But I think when you see Anna in possession, it's almost, you know, the unspoken word there is so much stronger. It's all of those emotions kind of, you know, personified. And like you said, you know, shown through physical means rather than talking. And I think actually it becomes far more powerful performance than compared to if she was just talking about, you know, how she feels. And do you think that it in general, and whether it's, you know, real life versus horror films, that women in particular are often shown as having maybe more difficulty expressing their emotions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I think obviously, I guess it's sort of, to speak in general terms, it's hard to, you know, we're such a diverse bunch that it's hard to speak in generalities. But yeah, I mean, I think speaking personally, I think I've certainly in the past like found it difficult to articulate certain emotions. Whether it be like sadness or anger, certain anxieties, and I used to think that, like, I think it's partly always this like a British thing, because, you know, we try really hard like not to, you know, tell people how we feel, and so maybe it's like a cultural thing, but I think actually like within the current society that we live in, I think, you know, ultimately women are socialized to, you know, for example, not be violent and not express our feelings in a particular way. And I think that, you know, and it's sort of not feminine to express, you know, violence and that kind of thing. It's sort of, I guess I would agree with you generally speaking that I think women do have a difficult time expressing certain ideas, especially within like a patriarchal society where, you know, maybe certain expressions aren't seen as too feminine enough, or it's seen as like things that people don't want to hear. And so, and I think it's really interesting because if women can't articulate certain feelings, but, you know, for example, if you do have like anger and you do have an impulse of violence within you, if you're not allowed to like express that, then, you know, where does that impulse go? And I think that one way, if you can't unleash violence, then maybe you unleash it upon yourself, so you kind of like internalize that violence, and maybe women maybe are more likely to do that. So, and that, I guess that can manifest obviously in, you know, through self-harm potentially, or, I mean, just my own small example. I remember when I was a teenager, I remember being sort of particularly stressed out for various reasons, and I ended up having a sort of a version of somatic stress myself, where I had alopecia and basically my hair fell out, and I think that was an expression of my own, like, not really being able to communicate, and then my body sort of reacting to that, which and I don't know if you sort of have a similar feeling about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that I think you're absolutely right when it's, you know, and I think Ali touched on it a minute ago. It's like women are expected to be a lot more emotionally in tuned, but to particular feelings that aren't perhaps, as attached to negative connotations, let's say, like you said, like rage or violence or anger. And I remember as a kid, I as a teenager, I used to get very pent up with it, so much so that I ended up having to go to anger management through just flipping up a table, through getting so angry. And it was, they were kind of like, why are you angry? And I was like, it's, I don't want to talk about it, but it comes out, more physical. And kind of going back to your point about like self-harm, I think as well, there's an aspect of like self-sabotage, for instance, And I wanted to discuss one other thing with you, which you kind of mentioned. So you were talking about how your experience with developing cancer made you feel like a sense of connection to the abject tentacle creature. And I was just wondering if you could, I thought it was a really kind of interesting and personal thing to you, and whether you could kind of talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. So to give a bit of context, long story short, at the beginning of last year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and fast forward to now, sort of happy to say, as far as I know, like I'm cancer free and on the mend. But watching the movie again in that context and for this panel, it was just really fascinating because I was really struck by the allusions to cancer actually in the film. For example, firstly, like the slimy goo monster, it's such an abject thing that reminded me actually of cancer in itself. So it almost reminded me of like the mental projection about what I thought my cancer looked like. So like something that's like this malignant growth, and it's like all encompassing, and it has the potential for to basically self-destruct, to cause self-destruction, annihilation, that kind of thing. And I did think that like in the movie, like some of Anna's rages actually reminded me of the steroid rages that I used to go into sometimes, because they would give you steroids obviously when you're on chemotherapy treatment. So I felt like a real kinship with Anna, I think, in some of her more physical moments, and then obviously I felt very bad for my poor husband, who had to deal with those rages, it was interesting because then when I was watching the movie, Anna makes a direct reference to cancer, like in the film, which kind of absolutely blew my mind, because I just didn't sort of expect to hear that, and she says something literally like, I know there's a third possibility, like cancer or madness. Cancer or madness contort reality, but what we're talking about pierces reality. I'm unable to say, it's impossible to say, maybe I'm too stupid. And when I heard her say that, I think it's in the scene where she's speaking directly to the camera, and I think she's in the ballet school. And it just blew my mind that she actually made that like direct connection. And I think that another dimension was the fact that Anna, she at the beginning, she hides the monster. It's like a shameful secret. She's embarrassed about it, and then obviously at the beginning of the movie, she's trying to deal with it alone. And to be honest, that just really reminded me of how sometimes we in society, and I think individuals, sometimes feel when you are diagnosed with that thing, when you're diagnosed with cancer. And it was almost like obviously everyone deals with it differently and has a different individual response, but it almost felt like the film was almost like a cautionary example of, like, I guess maybe not how to deal with that situation. So the importance of communication with our loved ones, like with our partners and our friends, I guess, like, so because if we don't, then we might sort of end up in a similar position of Anna and Mark, which obviously is a self-destruction essentially. So I guess I didn't expect that to obviously come into the film when I watched it, and I guess I just had that real kind of specific emotional response to the film.
Absolutely. And I think actually now that you've kind of spoken a bit about that, if I think back to when my mum had cancer, that kind of, like you said, that creature that's kind of there and almost, rules everything that's happening around relationships and things is so, pertinent. Can absolutely see it in the film. Thank you so much for sharing your very personal experience with it. And where can everyone find you? Where can they follow you?
Oh, I'm sorry, I've just lost the sound.
Can you hear me now? I think.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
They can hear you.
Yeah, I think I can hear you now. Sorry.
No worries. I was just asking where everyone can find you on social media.
Oh.
Come on.
So sorry about that. I couldn't quite hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. So sorry.
That's all right. That's the world of technology we live in. Right?
I'm sorry. That was a very smooth broadcast so far, and I totally fucked it up.
It's always the last moment. So before I let you go, where can everyone come and follow you and find more of your writings and your work?
Oh, sure. So, you can follow me on Instagram at Let's Scare Lauren to Death. I'm on Twitter, Let's Scare Lauren. I have a website, letscarelaurentodeath.com. If you want to check that out and read some of my reviews, and I also, if people are interested, I wrote a piece about my experience of cancer and horror movies and how it sort of provided me with a tool to have some kind of processing of trauma and of healing as well, if people are interested. So you can check that out.
Amazing. I will make sure I share all of those links. And thank you so much for joining me, Lauren.
Thank you for listening to me waffle on for 15 minutes or so.
We'll have you back on very soon. Speak to you soon.
All right, take care. Bye.
Okay, now I'm going to get on Sloane, and we are going to be discussing doppelgangers in the film, which I'm very excited to discuss. So, hello, Sloane. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm just kind of waiting for job things and stressing about that, but I would love to distract myself by talking about one of my favorite films of all time. I've seen this film, it had to be like close to 50 times at this point.
You might be the winner here so far.
It's been a lot. An ex of mine introduced me to the film in like maybe around 2011, 2012, right around when the book House of Psychotic Women came out. Yeah. And so like immediately I bought the book. I started like researching. I've been analyzing this film for like almost a decade now. I'm like fully obsessed.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So before we talk about doppelgangers, can you give a little bit of an introduction just to who you are so everyone knows?
Oh yeah. Before I just like keep going on about the film, I'm sorry, my ears are very small, so I have to keep like adjusting these. I'm Sloane. I've been writing about film for like maybe a year now. Prior to that, I had been writing about music journalism for 3 years. I studied television production and digital media, including journalism in school. I do like a lot of things. I don't know. I've been organizing like roundtables about stuff. I've been working on, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say if I'm involved in this project, but there might be a literary type thing about trans horror that I may or may not be involved with. I'm sorry, Wren. I don't know if I'm allowed to say.
Well, Wren's coming on
But,
after, so
that's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm stressed about right now.
Wren can tell you off.
They're gonna kill me. They're gonna absolutely kill me. It's fine. Everything's fine.
So thank you for that. And in terms of possession, like you said, I know you were very excited to discuss it. And I know that was a bit mean because I was like, you can only choose one thing that we're going to discuss. And of course, you've gone for doppelgangers, which is, you know, it's a pretty big part of the film. So I want to ask you, what do you think the doppelgangers represent in possession?
So recently I've been kind of delving into that topic a lot more personally, because I kind of alluded to so obviously the film kind of from the get-go, their relationship is crumbling. They're headed towards divorce. Anna is cheating with Heinrich. Mark is abusive. Nothing's going right in their relationship. And so we have them both creating doppelgangers. Wow, I can talk. Doppelgangers of each other, whether subconsciously, as Mark does with Helen, who's the school teacher for Bob, their child. And you know, obviously he's not physically creating it so much as with Anna, who is physically creating this doppelganger type tentacled monster that transforms itself into the mirror image of Mark, of Sam Neill 2.0, who is just at the very end, one of those last shots is just like the scariest thing, because you can tell it's they're just not quite human. And I will touch on the whole, I know you want to talk about the whole non-human thing at some point, but I believe that the doppelgangers kind of represent what they wish each other were, like creating their own perfect partner of sorts. Basically, I'm sorry, I have to get my notes out. I'm so nervous.
Don't be nervous. It's only me. The least far away from Sam Neill doppelganger, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Ooh. But so yeah, so like basically they're creating different versions of each other, and we're not kind of privy to the knowledge of how they were before the film, like how their relationship was before, like who they were as people. But we can only assume that like either this is the idealized version of each other that they had in their heads when they began their relationship, or this is how they were before things started going sour in their relationship. And the kind of the big difference between the two doppelgangers is that Anna wants to make a different version of Mark, in my opinion, because of his violence and his abuse towards her. And she wants the partner he was before he began this behavior, I'm assuming. Because again, we don't know if he's always been abusive. But in a way, they're kind of both really like clinging steadfastly to this relationship because they know that it's ending. And so I like to refer to this as grief of a relationship, where it's not over yet. You're still kind of determined to make this thing work. You don't want it to end because there is love there. Even if there isn't, there's a child there involved. There's other things in your life that connect you with this person, and you don't want to automatically give it up. So by creating these doppelgangers, it could provide a solution to that. But it's
yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of like their way of finding, obviously quite fucked up, but finding a way to almost stay together and, you know, forget about the parts they don't like of one another, because they've got, you know, they've almost got the shitty version, which is the real version, and the perfect version, which is their, you know, manifestation. And in that world, it seems to kind of work.
It does. And like, so, you know, Anna's not happy cheating with Heinrich because Heinrich kind of becomes abusive himself in a really bizarre way. And there's kind of a scene where the consent is kind of questionable with him. So Heinrich is not a solution for her for this relationship. And then she creates this tentacle monster, and she is, I wouldn't say the happiest she's been in the entire thing, but like when she's in that apartment with that tentacle monster, she feels the most comfortable in the relationship. Even though this isn't actually Mark. And I do believe it's kind of sort of a trauma response in that way, where it's like, this person was comfort for me. This person is no longer comfort for me. But if I can create this person again in the way that they were, I can regain that comfort, because the relationship is so toxic and so abusive, emotionally, physically, you know. Anna, and I wouldn't blame Anna for this at all, because it's very clear from the beginning that Mark is the aggressor in the relationship. That she's throwing things in the kitchen at him, like plates and stuff, like that. She's, you know, in the restaurant scene, she's like, you know, tossing the tables and everything, and it's like a very, very violent relationship, physically, verbally, all of it. And the creation of that doppelganger is kind of like a coping mechanism.
Yeah. And I think you know, something that, you know, you kind of spoke about there was how you know, Sam Neill's character, obviously he's the aggressor, but at the same time, like he always comes across as quite calm, but through his calmness is almost that constant sense of like his, you know, how obsessive he is, how possessive he is, how abusive he is. But it's, you know, we just see her losing her shit, but actually kind of going, no, I get why she's doing it. Like,
exactly. And that kind of goes into why he created this doppelganger in Helen, because he can control Helen, because he can no longer control Anna. Anna is spiraling out of control. He is no longer this dominant, possessive man who controls Anna's every move, Anna's entire life. And it may have sparked, because in the beginning, he's coming back from a trip. It may have sparked in his absence. And because in the beginning, he's kind of like asking her a whole bunch of questions like, what is happening? You don't know. When will you know? All of this kind of stuff where it seems like something happened and he wants to know what's going on. And all of a sudden there is this change.
Yeah.
In Anna's response to him, and kind of it seemed like it was almost an awakening for her. And you can even see in the videotapes that Mark discovers of Anna teaching a ballet class, where she's telling the cameraman, who I believe is actually Heinrich, that he says "I" for me, which basically he's defending her, he's supporting her, he is being her voice when she can't be, because she feels like she's been so abused that she can't have her own voice. You know?
Absolutely. And I've got one kind of final question for you on doppelgangers, which I know you were picking up a bit earlier. So obviously in the film, they are tangible, kind of grippable, real things. But do you think they're really there? Do you think they're metaphorical? Do you think they're perhaps even maybe alien, something completely kind of left field? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I haven't really thought about whether or not they're physically there or not. I do think that they are so metaphorical that they really could be not there, but at the same time, it's built as this fantasy film. And there are other characters that acknowledge the existence, like the PI who ends up getting shot in the apartment. And going on to the alien thing, I was thinking about it for a second, because initially I was like, no, I don't think that they're aliens, because I think that they are really like a projection of a subconscious kind of psychological thing. But if you think there is some sort of subplot with these businessmen and the man with the pink socks and the two like detectives situation, that could be like kind of a Men in Black type thing, if you could interpret it that way. I haven't explored that at all personally, but I'm just throwing it out there. Like it is a possibility. That's what it could represent, because you never know, and everyone interprets things differently. So to me, it's about this toxic abusive relationship, and to others it's about the previous speaker was talking about, it's about cancer. And everyone has all of these different views on this film because it's so abstract.
Yeah. And I think that's, just one of the reasons why Possession is so great, because there's so many ways that you can read it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about doppelgangers with me, Sloane. Where can everyone find you on social media?
I am on Twitter and Instagram as Pierogi Witch. That's Pierogi Witch. And that's about all you can find me at. I am doing things, though. I haven't done things in a while, but things are in the pipeline. So follow me, request me, because I am on private because I'm trying to get a job. So I will accept your request.
I will make sure that everyone's got your link so that they can request, and you can deny them all. They're all weirdos anyways.
Just hit X on all of them.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again, Sloane, and I cannot wait to speak to you again soon.
Thank you for having me. All right, bye.
And then finally, I am going to be joined in 1 second by Wren, and we're going to be talking about bipolar personality disorder and the film. So our final kind of perspective on the film. So, hello, Wren. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's been a while since I saw you, about a month.
Yeah, I was going to say a few weeks since we've done this.
Yeah. Time just is flying by. So for anyone that's joining. Do you just want to give a quick introduction to who you are so everyone knows?
Yeah, hi, I'm Wren Crain. I write about horror movies. I'm, as Sloane said, putting together a book with my amazing partner, Ten, about trans representation in horror. You can find that online on Twitter at Transploit Book. So there are updates coming out and stuff. They were allowed to talk about it. They're fine.
Well, I was wondering. I did think it was kind of out there, but you know, Sloane wasn't sure, and I was like, well, you know, Wren can tell you off. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, they're allowed to say that they're writing for it. It's fine. They are.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to discuss Possession with me. You are on. I think my internet tried to cut out there. All right, let's fingers crossed it stays with us. So you were mentioning, and I think again a really fascinating perspective, and you know everyone's kind of got different views of this film. So you were mentioning similarities between bipolar personality disorder and perhaps some of the characters in Possession. And I was just wondering in kind of what ways do you think the film explores this?
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's bipolar and borderline personality disorder. They are very similar. They just have kind of different periods of emotional cycles. It can be read the same way, but I think Possession is the first film I ever watched where I was like, oh, this really captures the intensity of emotions that I hadn't seen other films get before, especially the way it goes from 0 to 100 instantly.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. You're right. I mean, that kind of scale is, I think it starts and you go, no, it's not too bad. And then it's like, bam, what the fuck is going on in this movie, right?
Yeah, people warned me. They were like, oh, this is really intense. And I was like, okay, sure. You know, how you don't believe it. And then I started it and it was slow. It was all about characters and I was into it. And I think it was the restaurant scene where he just loses it and explodes. And after that point, it really doesn't calm down again till the credits roll.
Yeah. It kind of, I feel like it's kind of like a ladder that just keeps going up and up and up and up. And
Completely.
It never comes back down, does it?
No, not at all. And the way they interact with each other and the bit where she's screaming in the street or the bit where I think it's in a train station where that's all taking place and she's having a very, very visceral reaction. And it's some of the best body acting I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, that scene is, you know, it is so powerful. And I think, you know, that for me, I was like, oh, I've absolutely been that absolute psycho, just like screaming in the middle of the night, being like, ah. And in terms of like, you know, kind of going back to what you're saying more about borderline personality disorder, do you think that it's just to do with Anna, or do you think that perhaps, you know, kind of all the characters represent different aspects of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, Anna is the one I relate to personally, just when it comes to it. I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, I'm literally going through a breakup right now, so this was the most insane film to have to watch and talk about. So Anna was who I related to in that sense, but Mark has a lot of things, like he tries to control everything, and that's another thing you can kind of do when you feel like you're scared of losing control, as you often are with BPD because your emotions are so unpredictable. So Mark is kind of that, and then there's Heinrich, who he said something that I'd noted, and he was saying, like, is Anna really becoming someone else, or is she more open to herself? And I think he kind of represents a bit of that self-exploration of like examining your own feelings and figuring out who you are alongside having all of that intensity as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. And you know, I kind of forgot that he said that. And I think that's the thing. I think, you know, throughout the film, you see kind of Anna struggling to communicate how she feels. And it seems like, you know, as she gets towards the end of the film, where obviously her behavior becomes what could be described as more erratic, you know, seeing a little decapitated head in the fridge, kind of going, is she all right, or is something happening? She seems to become a lot more, yeah, at one with herself, the more she kind of accepts that maybe she is a little unhinged, but that's all right.
Yeah, it seems like for her, it kind of, Mark is, you know, being controlled, learning to control all of these things. And then Heinrich is like, she can just explore who she is and kind of not answer to anyone. And he's kind of a bit more like wild, and he's not controlling in the slightest, basically. And I think it just really represents her going from one to the other and learning, like, she doesn't have to necessarily control herself all the time, and she doesn't have to have everything all together, and it's okay for her to explore like being a bit wild or being a bit unpredictable. And I really like the way those two kind of represent how she feels about herself, even though it's like her relationships with other people.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I completely agree with you. I think, you know, I think throughout the film there's a lot of comparison between, you know, the opposite, I guess, ends of the spectrum, and, you know, kind of picking up on what we were discussing with Sloane is about the doppelgangers. Do you think they're kind of tying into that BPD element, or, you know, what do you think kind of the doppelgangers represent in that sense?
I mean, this is only my read. Obviously, other people with BPD will have completely different reads of this. But I always found the doppelgangers were kind of the person that you wish you could present yourself as being calm and rational and just what people want you to be. And that's like what she spends the whole film doing, is fighting against that and against Mark, and she's just fighting for this whole film. But no, I think it definitely, the doppelgangers kind of show who you think like society should be, because obviously it's a very, very stigmatized mental illness. People have a lot of misconceptions about it, and you know, you kind of feel the need to not talk about it because people are like that. And then you have this other version where you're like, oh no, I'm presentable, I'm not this intense person.
Yeah, and I guess it's, you know, I think you're absolutely right. You know, if you think of Helen, who's, you know, she's kind of the school teacher, she's dressed in white, she has, you know, her hair's always done nicely, she wears, you know, she's always kind of like prim and proper and quiet, and, you know, what I guess society would expect of, in this setting anyway, a woman and a mother and a wife to be very, you know, kind of subdued. Whereas Anna's, you know, she's having affairs, the kid hasn't been fed for days, he's a mess. I'm pretty sure she wears the same dress.
She does wear the same dress the entire time.
And I was like, well, that's been all of us in lockdown. So pretty... But yeah, you're right about it. Kind of, it's like society. It's absolutely society's expectations. Yeah,
and the way you said that, actually, that reminds me. Mark says something. It's really early on. It's when they first decided to break up, and he says that the way she's doing it isn't proper, and he kind of then goes to the doppelganger, who is really reserved, and like you said, Anna's wild, and she's not looking after herself. She's not looking after anyone else.
And it's almost like, you know, because she's obviously, you know, experiencing like severe, you know, whether it's trauma, whether it's PTSD, you know, whatever it is, which can, you know, I think we'll all take a different take on it. It's like, what is the proper way to experience those things? Like, is there a right way to experience something like that? Probably not.
No, not exactly. There's no one way, but Mark, he says that, and then, I mean, for one thing, we've got to talk about him on that rocking chair, because I feel motion sick watching him on that rocking chair. It's awful. But when he's doing that, he's like, you've got to get control of all things. You've got to control yourself, and it's basically her going from being reserved and controlled to being completely unrestrained and just base instinct and very animalistic at times as well.
Yeah, I mean,
very animalistic.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't stop thinking about the rocking chair now. I forgot how much it cracks me up. He's just like, how can he talk about control when he's just going back and forth on that bloody chair, right?
I would have loved to have been on set that day watching Sam Neill film that scene. I want to know how many takes it got of him, because he is swinging in that chair.
I think we need to reach out to him on Twitter, and I mean, he should do an updated version of it. Like, let's make it happen. We need to make this happen.
Oh wow! Can he do that as a treat for all of us in the pandemic? Just recreate this scene, Sam Neill, please. We just want a recreation of the rocking chair scene.
Right, after this, we are starting a serious petition for this to happen. It's going to happen.
It has to. We'll make it happen.
But yeah, you were on your actual point. Sorry, point up chair. You're right. It does become like a really, really primal, animalistic kind of depiction, and I think it's really interesting, because I think at the end of the day, like, we are all kind of run by animal basic needs, really, aren't we? And it's I think, her performance is just so raw, really.
Oh, incredibly. She is unhinged for 90% of that film.
Yeah. And I'm like, I wish I could act in a scene like that so I could just be unhinged.
I mean, Isabella Gianni is a goddess, and I would propose marriage if I could, honestly. She's incredible, but the acting in that, the way she is, I'm like kind of jealous of her just getting to go to those extremes and just let it all out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got kind of one final question for you. Just going back to kind of, BPD and what how you found that was represented in the film. And as I've been asking everyone, kind of tying their point back to it, in that respect, what do you think the tentacle monster might represent, if anything?
I mean, I loved the reveal of that monster. That is probably one of my favourite moments in film, though, to be honest, because I was anticipating something the entire time. But I think the monster, from the BPD or mental illness perspective, for me, it kind of, because she preferred it with him, because I assume when she was saying I preferred it with him and all this, she was actually talking about the monster and not Heinrich at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of represents how you're scared of losing control and being consumed by all these feelings, but at the same time, you're also really tempted to just allow it to happen and just feel them and not hide them and have the doppelganger blank mask on and just, yeah. So I really think the monster represented that. But I know you asked if you thought they could be aliens. And I was thinking, I don't think they'd be, if they were like a real thing and not a metaphor for her mental state, I definitely think they would be something that would more likely crawl out of a sewer than come from.
Yeah, no, I can see that. It's kind of, it's like, yeah, like human, I don't know what the word for it is, like kind of like a human sewer slug.
A weird, gross humanoid slug that comes from underneath the earth. That's if they were a real thing, but obviously I do personally think they're a representation of the mental state of Anna, and probably everyone in the film actually at that point.
Yeah, I think everyone's mental state in the film is not quite stable, but you know, I think that is the reason why so many of us love this film, because it just, you know, it kind of talks a lot to all of our mental states, no matter where we are or where we've been in life, which is why I think, you know, Possession is such a fantastic film. So Wren, thank you so much for coming on and talking about Possession. Where can everyone follow you and find you?
Well, thank you for having me on, and everyone can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd and all the internet places at B_rollbanshee, but they can also follow the Transploitation is the name of the book I'm working on, and that can be followed at Transploit_book on Twitter and Instagram too.
Amazing. I will make sure everything is linked, and I am very excited about the book, as I know Sloane is, as they already gave away some spoilers, but I will make sure that everyone knows about the book as well. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I will speak to you tomorrow.
You too.
Bye. Well, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening to our discussion on Andrzej Zulawski's Possession 40 years later. It doesn't seem like it was made quite 40 years ago. Sorry, it's very late. It's past my bedtime. But it was a big thank you to all of our guests, to Ali Taylor, Lauren Hart, Sloane Kay, and Wren Crain. It has been a fascinating discussion. I'm sure you will agree. We've covered a lot of topics. I think we could have all kept on going for a very, very long time, but I am going to let everyone that's in the UK at least go to bed. And if you are around the rest of the world, enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll make sure everything's linked so you can follow everyone. And do make sure that you go to ghoulsmagazine.com where you can check out our latest reviews, our latest editorials, and you can also, if you fancy, become a member of Ghouls Magazine, where you will get weekly new and fresh content that is only exclusive to our members. So please do have a look over on ghoulsmagazine.com. And again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evenings, your mornings, and your nights.